Yesterday we heard from a CEO who decided to throw it all over and become a dancer. We're now going to hear from an architect who decided that he actually wanted to be a playwright. Oren Safdie.
Theater.
A man of surprises.
Theater is the element of surprise.
Yeah.
But actually, I was stuck there for some technical difficulties. I'm actually going to sit. I was just looking at this, and speaking of theater, I was thinking that this is the perfect metaphor for the death of theater, because you have the person here, and yet when I was in the audience, I found myself looking at the screen, and then you have all these television sets glaring at me, kind of saying, come write for television. So I think this is kind of what I'm dealing with, the world of film and television, which kind of compete against writing for plays. But I thought I'd just tell you a story about the last week. I was in the eastern townships in Lake Mangford, Magog, which is visiting my uncle's country house. And I was at a dinner party where there were a lot of people kind of sitting out on the porch, mostly older people. And I had just come back from New York. I had had a reading of a play, and I was talking a bit about it. It actually has to do with architecture, so I'm going back into that a bit. But on the wings, there was this young guy who, well, he was, 15, young kid. I kind of see myself sometimes as a kid, so whenever I see ages, it's hard to know which age is what. But he was listening, and he was just not really, participating in the conversation. He almost seemed very shy. And after everyone left, he came up to me and he said, well, how did you become a playwright? So I told him, I was in high school. I probably wrote, a couple of good essays. But then I got discouraged because then in grade 10 or 11, my English teacher told me that I was, not worthy of being in the school for English. This happened much later in my career at Columbia, too. But so I was kind of discouraged to go into writing, and so I kind of went through a path where I then went on to CEGEP, and I majored in economics for a year, and I went to Skidmore College, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I took economic courses. I got an A in it, and I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then I took a sociology course. I got an A in that. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then I changed my major to socioeconomics and then back to eco-sociology. And then by the time I finished, there was a year where I went to Israel there and did a junior year abroad. And I didn't get into religion, but, I went, you had to study some things on Judaism. And then came back, and before I graduated, managed to kind of cap on an art minor. So I started doing with sculpture and things, and I still wasn't sure what I was doing. So what else? I applied to architecture school. It seemed like the right thing to do. I guess in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, this is a good way to kind of get closer with my dad, or maybe, at least maybe there'd be a job waiting for me. It was kind of the times when there was that. But I don't know if that's, maybe not. So in my third year in architecture school, this is, MF, I'm about 24 here, 25. It's the MFA program. It's quite brutal. You don't go through these, programs just to have fun. My last semester, I was allowed to take a course in anything that I wanted. And I took a playwriting course, and I won this competition that they had, and they had 2 actors read my work, and I saw these people on stage, and I said, that's what I want to do. It kind of like grabbed me. So everyone was like, Oren, you're going to be, going to work now for an architect, whoever that may be. And I kind of went to Iowa. I went to get far away as possible, and went to Iowa, and thought I was going to the Iowa workshop, but you see, I was kind of naive again, because it was Iowa State, and I was supposed to go to University of Iowa, the Iowa's workshop, so I found myself in the middle of a cornfield, teaching architecture to farmers, like how to draft kitchens, and And then I took some writing courses. Luckily, Jane Smiley was a teacher there, and she was like, yeah, you got a little bit of talent. So after I told this kid all this, I think he was, a bit exhausted, and I think he was like saying, well, I don't know, maybe I'll go back into farming or something. But then I thought, I said, that's how I got there, but that's not really how I became a writer or how writing kind of became me. And so I told him this, and it just kind of came out. When I was 6 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night, and my room was filled with smoke. And we lived in Westmount in a very old house, and I was terrified of the dark. I remember I used to have a rocking horse with these black marble eyes that I'd have to put a towel over its head because, I was afraid it would come to life in the middle of the night when the lights went out. But somehow I managed to get the courage to get out of bed and to go down the long haunted hallway. It wasn't that long, it was probably from here to there, but when you're that age, it just looks like eternity. And wake up my parents, and we got out of the house. And 2 minutes after we got out of the house, my sister's room exploded. The whole house exploded and burnt to the ground. I like to remind my sister of this whenever we get any sort of disagreements. But we lost everything, really. The horse, and we lost clothes, pictures, photographs, and really everything. We even lost a cat and a land turtle that my father had brought back from Israel, kind of ironically enough, to escape the under fire in the Middle East, and yet it comes here to Canada, and on the coldest night of the winter dies in a fire. From the turtle's perspective, it's kind of strange. But somehow I look back on that event as a very positive time in my life, I got to play with the firemen, and we got to stay in a somebody's laughing there, I think that's my wife. But we got to stay in a hotel with a pool, and the pool wasn't working, but you got to tell your friends, I'm staying in the pool. And finally, most important thing was that, my family felt like we really came close together. So 6 years later, my parents told my sister and I that they were separating. And unlike a fire, which happens overnight, most separations and divorces seem to take a couple of weeks, a month, a year. They take time. And in that time, I think a couple of things happen, which is that you either completely withdraw from the family, or you try and find ways to put the family back together again. You try and think of any way that you can bring, this unit back together again. In a fire, you see the structure collapsed in front of you. You realize right away that it's not coming back, especially when you're not properly insured, which was the case. But with the family, the structure and the remnants are still standing. It's just there's a lot of renovations and alterations to the whole thing. So in some ways I was stuck. My sister, I think, withdrew, and I, was stuck in neutral. Some might even argue reverse. But I think at that moment, that's kind of what led me later to find writing as a way to make myself feel complete. It wasn't by accident that I was bouncing around to all these schools searching. I needed, I guess, that time to find something that made me feel complete. And, looking at all my work, which hasn't really been seen in this country very much, but that's a whole nother thing. I think the underlying, I've taken that, I don't know if it's a negative, but I've taken that aspect and I think I've tried to put it into all my work. And that's even true of one of my early plays, La Compagnie, which is set in East End, Montreal, in a sweatshop factory, where all these workers are working for $4 an hour, and the conditions are terrible. And yet they just feel like every day they come to work, they leave their home, their lives behind which are even more miserable at home, that at least when they come to work, there's a functionality to them. So, because they operate, there's the father figure, and everyone takes on their role as a family. In Jews and Jesus, I would say that it was about young people searching for religious identity, but what separates it from being sitcom-ish and a spoof on religion is this underlying thing. So I'd just like to show this clip right now of that, if possible. Nick is a religious student who's kind of looking to seduce this young tourist.
Just read. Shabbos dinner. Do you have a family for Shabbos? Shabbos, 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 Shabbos. Jewish people in Shabbos sit with family, bless the wine, and pray the Messiah will come. Finished?
Yeah, but I don't understand what you're getting at.
Now, is it written here clearly in black and white that Armageddon will come to those Jews who have closer allegiances to their country rather than their religion? I agree it's terrible that some people get caught in the middle, but in the larger picture
The
of
larger picture? How
Would
can
you let me finish? I didn't interrupt you, did I? I let you finish. Now, is it written there clearly in black and white that Armageddon will come under those circumstances?
No, that's an interpretation.
Is it or not?
So what? You're saying those Jews in Long Island are in danger because they own Christmas trees?
Hey, you don't see me living there.
You need help, that you're really a warped person.
Oh, why? Am I getting to you? Am I getting to you? I wish you could see yourself, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, just shut up with that.
All right. We obviously can't agree on this issue. We move on. The Torah is all about debate. We don't agree, we move on to the next issue. You don't believe in God? Fine. But tell me one thing. Why are you so uncomfortable with your heritage? Being Jewish is not only about God, it is about a people, it is about a struggle, it is about tradition.
Sexism.
What's sexism?
I personally will not follow a religion where men wake up every morning and thank God they're not women.
And you think that's sexism?
Of course it's sexism. What would you call it?
Sexism. But not the way you think. It's sexism against men. You see, we're weak. We're much weaker than you. Men hate pain. Think of the wife of Lot. She's the one who gets turned into a pillar of salt, not her husband. Women go through pain all the time. They have their periods. They give birth. They have to wash dishes. It's cook meals. It's pain. And that's what we mean by thanking God we're not women, because we're weak. We're weak. And the Bible compensates for that.
I don't believe you.
You don't believe? You don't believe. What's so hard to believe, huh? What's so hard to believe? You believe you're miserable? You believe you're lost? You believe you're empty, your family has fallen apart, and your life hasn't a drop of meaning? Yes. See, I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't pretend I know every message behind the scriptures, but I do have a family to eat dinner with tonight. A nice warm home with happy little children. Children who will grow up with direction in their life and without fear. Now, do you have such a place to go? I didn't think so. So you're coming or not? Because it's getting late and we still have to pick up some challah.
So that's a scene from Jews and Jesus. The next play that was most recently done was Fiddler Subterrane, which some of you might have read about. That dealt with a different type of separation. But I like to kind of skip over that because I'd also just like to talk about this and get in a last short scene of something else. Being in the States, I look at Canada very much in a way that is somewhat of a dysfunctional family as well. If I were to map Canada as a family, I would kind of have Ontario as the patriarch, the real breadwinner who made the most money, and Quebec would be the matriarch who recently discovered women's lib and wants equality now, and then some. Then British Columbia would be the eldest child who's independent and goes off and does whatever they want anyways. The Prairies would be the middle child, never getting enough attention. And the Maritimes would be the youngest who can't break away from the family yet and still kind of need their full support. And of course there's Newfoundland, which probably thinks that, not quite sure if it's been adopted yet. and declares its own time zones as a sign of protest. And the territories, well, that's, I think, cousins, but we're the cousins that have come and stayed too long. But I think that, living in the States, one thing that I feel is that I live in a functional family of a country. It has lots of problems. I'm very patriotic Canadian. I mean, and because I criticize sometimes, it's really because I want things to be better. Symbolism is a big thing in families. If a husband and wife are arguing, a symbolic gesture can do a big thing. I think in Canada we're faced with the same thing. For instance, Meech Lake could have parallels very much in the United States. They have affirmative action in the United States. Is everybody equal? Or in this last election, you had a case where not every vote counted for equal amount, but they chose that this will help heal the country. Symbolically, you have cases now about the Confederate flags that are in Georgia, which they took away from the flag, and from places like Mississippi, but Canada, we still have the Queen on our money. And how do you think that feels to somebody who's French Canadian and has to, every time they take out a penny, they have to use it? So I think these things, if Canada wants to be a functional family, they have to deal with these things, and that will really create an identity, so we don't always have to compare ourselves to the United States. Everything is, well, the United States this, the United States that. Well, we don't need that. If we have a direction and everyone comes together, call me idealistic, but, I think it can happen. So I'd like to show this last scene, and then I don't have nothing more to say, but in watching this exchange, it's between a family and a family therapist from my film, You Can Thank Me Later. Think of the English politicians and the French politicians and the child as us, okay?
It's not like I go out looking for it or anything. It's just something takes hold of me and shakes me till I give in. Chemical reaction. Billions of neutrons and protons, electrons building up inside of me. It's genetic. After all, you're the one that said we should be totally honest, say exactly what's on our mind, no matter how deranged or perverted it might sound. Huh? Just between you and me, don't you find that young girls these days mature a lot faster than they used to? Say it's something in the milk.
Sorry I'm late.
Where are the girls?
Chelsea's on her way from school, and Lisa went to visit a friend.
Friend?
Do you want to argue with her?
How can you let her go to see a friend when she knows
Edward,
perfectly
do you
well?
want to argue with her?
She's 10 years old.
Do you want to argue with her?
All right, really? Okay. And Chelsea?
She'll be here.
When?
She'll be here.
Fine. We relax now?
Yes.
Calm?
Yes.
Not gonna make me stick your head under the shower again to cool off, no? Good. Before we begin, I want her to know that I really respect her.
I can't believe what a bastard he is.
Go ahead.
I hate you so much.
I deserve it.
No, I'm not going to give him that satisfaction this time.
It's important for us to remain calm in this situation.
And be honest.
Can't think of ourselves. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Be honest.
No, we have to remember that whatever is said here today goes way beyond you and I. We have to put aside our own emotions. We have to think of our children, even our children's children.
There is just one thing that I need to know. Now, did she used to wait for you stripped down naked in the hotel room or discreetly dressed in a trench coat in the lobby?
We have to give the impression of stability.
Naked in bed or dressed in the lobby?
A loving atmosphere.
Bed or lobby?
I don't want to be here. I'd like that to stand for the record.
Honey, your mother and I haven't been getting along very well lately, and we're considering a temporary separation.
Baby, your father's taken up with a young girl from McGill. who he's been fucking in a hotel room 2 blocks away from our home every time he goes to walk the dog at night.
Can I have $1 for the soda machine?
What do you say?
Yeah.
You did?
So let's hope it won't be too much longer before we can see one of your plays on this stage here. Where's the management?